So Barbie is an awesome fantasy comedy drama movie with one of the best marketing campaigns that a movie has ever had. So the question then becomes, did this movie set itself up to fail and fall, as did it anticipate and build itself up too much? So the first time I watched this movie, I was a little bit disappointed as I was expecting so much more from it, but then watching it a second time and then reflecting on the film, basically writing my notes for this review, I actually realized that this movie is so layered and so much more sophisticated, as on the surface it can definitely appear as a bit of a feminist message movie looking at the role of women in the 1950s and then doing a bit of a role reversal and having men actually being placed in the role of women in that time, but it's actually so much more than that. For instance, being a bit of an allegory of Adam and Eve and seeing what happens when Barbie and Ken leave their utopian paradise and enter into the real world and experience things from an adult point of view, but with a kid's mindset. I just thought that aspect was actually so much more deeper than it can appear from a surface level. Along with the Truman Show metaphor in terms of wanting to break out of your imposed reality and wanting to live a life of meaning and purpose for yourself. And Barbie in particular desires to be so much more than just being a plastic toy, and I absolutely loved Margot Robbie's line right at the end of this movie in terms of she wants to be more than just a thing. And I just love how self-aware this movie is, very similar to a lot of recent Warner Brothers projects and movies in particular. For example, referencing the Snyder Cut, I thought that line was absolutely incredible. And speaking of Margot Robbie, I feel like her partnership with Greta Gerwig, the director of this movie, along with Noah Baumbach as well, who was the writer along with Greta Gerwig, was just so good. And of course Margot Robbie was a producer on this film, and I just feel like as a trio they just created such a good film. And like I said, it wasn't just hammering home the feminist message. Because of Noah's involvement and of course Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie's involvement as well, they really did bring the male perspective into this and just created a really great final product. And it's really interesting as the history in terms of the making of this movie is actually really layered and was involving lots of different studios, as originally it was going to be produced by Universal, and then Sony and Amy Schumer was first attached, then Anne Hathaway, and now Margot Robbie, so it was just moved from studio to studio. And I just ultimately loved what Warner Brothers did with this movie. Tons of meta humor, like I said, they are absolutely prolific with this, and tons of subversive storytelling. And I think what people were expecting from a Barbie movie, this definitely does counter their predictions. And I think especially what they did with the Ken character was just so clever, but more on that later. I also love the existential crisis that is taking place with all of these different characters, but it's not only a really funny and layered and unexpected movie, it's actually pretty emotional at the same time. And I loved the fact, you know, when the Barbie character is crying because she is expecting everybody to absolutely love her, as she is so adored in Barbie land. And I think this is really interesting, as when you're raising kids and you make them feel like they are absolutely going to be adored by the entire world, and then when they step into the harsh realities of the real world, then this is going to be a bit of a blow to them. Their mental health is of course going to suffer, and they're not going to be able to understand why they were led to believe that they are so loved when in fact the real world is a completely different picture. So like I said, this movie just works on so many different levels. And speaking of Barbie land, I just think the world building in this movie is just absolutely incredible, as they just used all of the source material, so to speak, of the Barbie toy and created this world so true to form. And I just think the concept of and Ken, in terms of Ken just being an additional toy for people who are playing with Barbie, was just so clever. I do think from a storyline perspective, they definitely could have pushed it a little bit more, especially as these characters are just entering the real world and don't know anything about it. And like I said, you know, what they did do with this film was really good. I just realized that they could have pushed it so much further. And on that point, the Mattel scenes were just so disappointing for me, as I just felt, you know, this big evil corporation just could have done so much more. I just felt like it was a little bit of a laughing stock. What they did with Will Ferrell, I mean, of course he got a bit of a big payday from this film, so they wanted to use him a lot. But firstly, the jokes just didn't land. Their scenes were really awkward and really lame. And I just thought it was a little bit pathetic, as I just felt like it just could have been so much more incredible. But that being said, the sequence in which stereotypical Barbie played by Margot Robbie was almost going to be boxed up and stuck up and tied up, I thought that was actually pretty scary. And I just feel like if there were a couple more moments and a couple more storylines to that degree, it could have been absolutely brilliant. I know that a lot of people were expecting this movie to be a true man-bashing film, and even though there are a couple of moments of that in here, especially in the beginning, I feel like it does ultimately end with a moment of equality, which I think was really good. However, I do think it's a little bit interesting how they are basically saying that men are so easily tricked which I thought was really, really interesting, as of course Ken was able to rule the entire Barbie world when he turned it into the Ken world equivalent, and then Barbie was able to just really, really easily turn it back. And I feel like if they wanted to go down the darker, more thriller-based route, they could have just done so much more with that particular storyline too. And from a number of different characters' perspectives, this movie was also saying, you know, don't be so obsessed with someone, as this can be your undoing. So for example, this is what allowed all of the Barbies to ultimately dethrone the Ken's characters, and don't tie all of your worth to another person, as that other person can leave, and then what does that leave for you? I thought that Margot Robbie was absolutely flawless, quite literally, as Barbie. I feel like this really is her defining role, and she was just so believable across the entire film, as she does have a really, really brilliant character arc. First being really, really beloved, and then having a bit of an existential crisis, and then coming into the real world and seeing that actually she isn't as loved as she thought she was, and then going back into Barbie land, having to fix everything, and then ultimately making the decision for herself to come back into the real world. I feel like her arc was just so brilliant, and Margot Robbie just played it so well and was able to bring all of the comedic moments as well as all of the dramatic moments to life so flawlessly. And I just thought that all of the role reversal moments were just depicted really, really well. And I thought it's a really great lesson, building on what I just said a moment ago, in terms of not being defined by your significant other, for both Barbie and for Ken. And speaking of Ken, I just think Ryan Gosling was absolutely incredible in this movie. Literally every single scene that he was in, he stole it. He literally was acting his heart out, and I just think the storyline of what they did with the stereotypical Ken was so good. So much better than I thought it would be, and it was really, really interesting building on the role reversal perspective in terms of this guy's self-esteem was literally on the floor, and his purpose in life was just basically getting the attention and validation from Barbie. And I just think it's a really interesting cautionary tale, as a lot of different other storylines and parables do talk about the fact that, you know, you really do need to be careful about the people that you push to the side and that you really neglect and push out of society even, as they are the ones that can really come back with a vengeance and then destroy society, which you do see from a Shakespearean perspective with the Ken character, as he definitely did come back with a lot more power and a lot more wisdom, and then almost did completely destroy Barbie land, but he was still seeking approval from Barbie, which, like I said, was his ultimate undoing. His musical number was absolutely incredible. I love the line of, you know, anywhere else I would be a 10, but he's obviously with Barbie, who just doesn't value him or doesn't really see him at all. I thought his rivalry with Simu Liu's character was absolutely brilliant. The fact that he is with all of these other Kens and is able to convince them about what the real world is really like. There are rumors that we are going to get a bit of a Ken spin-off, and I just think we need this movie, as Ken was just written and created so well here. I absolutely loved Weird Barbie. I thought it was really, really clever how she is really connected to the real world and offers a bit of a Morpheus perspective from the Matrix in terms of saying, you know, are you going to go down this path or the other path? America Ferrera was absolutely incredible in this movie, being the true owner of stereotypical Barbie, and I loved how connected these two characters were, and her monologue in terms of talking about the impossibility of being perfect was absolutely brilliant. And I love the way in which you first ever see this character, you do think that actually she is going to be the character from Ugly Betty, and I absolutely loved that TV series, and it was just so good seeing all those slight little nods to it. The ghost of the real Barbie creator still lingering around in the Mattel office was a really nice touch, and I loved her coming into the Barbie land wild space right at the end of this film and just allowing stereotypical Barbie to have the reality that she actually wants, and also telling the audience that, you know, she named her after her own real daughter. And all of the supporting cast in this movie were just absolutely brilliant. I love the fact that we got John Cena in here, and also a number of different actors that you can spot from other brilliant successful TV shows, for example like Secret Invasion, The After Party, and of course Superman and Lois. So it was just so wicked in this film, and on reflection I just think is so much stronger than I thought it would be. And so for all of those reasons, I'm going to give Barbie a solid 7.5 out of 10. Now I'd love to hear what you thought of this film, so please let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video.